The sky didn't cry for her mother. It poured like it was trying to wash the world clean, but nothing felt clean that day. Vivien stood at the edge of the brave, the hem of her black dress soaked and heavy with rain. Her shoes had long disappeared into the mud, but she didn't move. Around her, umbrellas bloomed like sad flowers. Faces blurred behind veils and water. There were whispers of, "She's at peace now," of, "She fought so hard," but Vivien didn't hear any of it. Her eyes were fixed on one person, her father, Alan Whitmore, the man who held her mother's hand through chemo, the man who used to sit silently at the hospital bedside pretending to read newspapers while his wife wasted away. But now, his back was straight, his hands weren't shaking, his jaw was clenched but not from sorrow. His face wasn't wet with tears, just rain. He looked relieved, as if the worst was finally over, as if now he could breathe. Vivien blinked. Was she imagining it? Was it just her grief distorting everything? But then he looked up, and their eyes met, and for the briefest second, he looked away first. That single glance, that tiny flicker of avoidance, it said everything. He wasn't broken. He wasn't devastated. He was free. And that's when it hit her like the shovels striking earth. Her mother wasn't the only one being buried today. Vivien's entire childhood, her sense of family, of safety, of home was going into that ground too. The door didn't creak. It opened like any normal Tuesday, but nothing after that moment felt normal again. Vivien dropped her backpack by the stairs like always. She called out softly, "Dad?" No answer. Then she smelled it. Coffee. Rich. Fresh. Not the bitter instant stuff her dad usually made. She followed the scent, and there she was, a woman, sitting at the kitchen island like she belonged there. Crossed legs, perfect makeup, red lipstick too loud for a house still morning. But it wasn't the lipstick that froze Vivien. It was the mug, her mother's mug. White ceramic with tiny purple wildflowers. The one her mom had brought back from her childhood town. The one she used every Sunday morning when the world was quiet and warm. That mug didn't just hold coffee. It held memories. It held her mother's scent, her smile, her hands. And now it was in the hands of a stranger. The woman smiled sweetly, too sweet. "You must be Vivien," she said. "I'm Celeste. Your father and I work together." Work together? Vivien wanted to scream. Instead, she nodded, wordless, and walked away, numb. Upstairs, she closed her door and leaned against it, heart thudding. Her mother wasn't just gone. She was being erased, replaced, like a mug in a cabinet. And Vivien wasn't sure which hurt more, the loss or how quickly someone else had moved in to fill the space. Dinner smelled like something out of a magazine. Fresh herbs, creamy pasta, candles flickering like everything was fine. But Vivien couldn't taste a thing. She sat stiffly at the table across from Celeste, who smiled like this was just any other family dinner. Her father sat at the head of the table, his voice calm, deliberate. "Vivien, we need to talk about expectations." She looked up, fork frozen midair. "Celeste is part of our family now," he continued. "It's time you started treating her as such. You will call her Mom." The words didn't land like a request, they landed like a verdict. Vivien blinked slowly. "She's not my mother." Celeste reached for his hand. "She's grieving, Alan. We have to be patient." Vivien's voice cracked. "Don't talk about my grief like you understand it." Her father's tone sharpened like a blade. "This is how things are going to be. You will call her Mom, and you will show her respect under my roof." Silence, just the ticking of the grandfather clock in the hallway. Then Vivien stood, I will never call her that. Her father's face darkened. His voice dropped. Sit down. We're not done. She held her ground. Yes, we are. A chair scraped against hardwood as he stood violently, his eyes full of rage she had never seen before. He stormed out of the dining room. Vivien's body shook, her hands trembling. But Celeste just blotted her lips with a napkin, eyes down. A few minutes later, her father came back. He threw a duffel bag at her feet. Some of her clothes spilled out. Already packed? Dad, she whispered. I'm 17. He didn't blink. Then act like it. When you're ready to accept how this family works now, you can come back. She looked at Celeste, begging for mercy, for sanity. Celeste just stared at her plate. Vivien picked up the bag with shaking fingers, walked to the front door. She paused, waited for him to say something, anything. He didn't. The door closed behind her with a quiet click. And in that moment, she felt something far worse than being abandoned. She felt erased. She stood on the porch, dripping wet, hair matted to her forehead, jacket clinging to her shoulders. The duffel bag hung off her arm like dead weight. This was supposed to be the safe place, her best friend's house. 8 years of birthday parties, sleepovers, homework marathons. Mariah's family loves you like their own, her mom used to say. So she knocked. The door opened. Not Mariah, but her mom. The woman's smile froze when she saw Vivien. Oh, sweetheart, I'm so sorry. Vivien forced a breath. Can I stay for a night or two? Just until... The woman glanced over her shoulder, then back. Her voice dropped. It's not a good time. We have college tours this weekend. Vivien blinked. I'll stay out of the way, I swear. I just need somewhere... It's not about you, the woman said too quickly. Then came the words Vivien would never forget. You're a disruption. The porch light above them flickered. Her ears buzzed. Mariah needs to focus on her future, the woman added, softer, like that made it better. Then the door closed. No hugs, no second chances, just the dull thud of rejection. She stood there for a long moment, not because she had hope, but because she didn't know where else to go. The park was quiet, too quiet. It used to be her favorite place. Her mom would bring sandwiches in brown paper bags, and they'd sit on this very bench, laughing, feeding birds. Now the bench was cold, and the birds were gone. Vivien curled into herself, knees pulled to her chest, jacket zipped all the way up. But the wind still got in, biting, cruel. Her stomach growled so loudly it startled her. She hadn't eaten since lunch at school. That was over 12 hours ago. The city didn't look the same at night. Shadows moved, footsteps echoed. Every rustle in the trees made her flinch. She wrapped her arms around her duffel bag like it could protect her, like it was a shield. She tried to stay awake, but the cold crept in through her spine. The silence started to buzz. Her eyes stung. And then it came like a wave. The image of her mother's hands fixing her collar before school, her voice humming in the kitchen. Vivien whispered, barely a sound, "Mom, I don't know what to do." And that's when the tears finally came. Not the hot, angry kind, but the quiet ones. The kind that come when even hope has given up. She sat there under a broken street lamp in the middle of a city that didn't care and cried until there was nothing left inside. And when the crying stopped, she was still cold, still hungry. But most of all, she was still alone. The sun hadn't risen yet, but the light was changing just enough to turn the black of night into something smoky gray. Vivien was still on the bench, her eyes swollen, throat sore, and fingers stiff from the cold. She didn't even notice the woman at first, just the soft rustle of canvas shoes on pavement. "You look like you've had one hell of a night," a gentle voice said. Vivien flinched. She looked up, and there she was. A woman with kind but sharp eyes, a canvas tote full of books, and a purple beret that somehow looked both ridiculous and regal. "Don't worry," the woman added, "I don't bite." Vivien stayed quiet. She wasn't in the mood for charity. "Name's Eleanor," the woman continued. "Used to run the library over there. Now I mostly feed birds and read in peace." She held out a small paper bag. Inside, a buttered roll, warm. Vivien hesitated, then took it. It wasn't much. But it was the first act of kindness she'd felt in days. "You sleeping out here?" Eleanor asked. Vivien nodded slowly, the shame pressing against her ribs. Eleanor didn't gasp, didn't scold. She just studied her with those observant, tired eyes, then said calmly, "Well, I've got a spare room. Sort of. It's more like an attic, but it's warm, and you wouldn't be the first runaway I've taken in." Vivien stared at her. "Why would you help me? You don't even know me." Eleanor smiled. "I know enough. You're a minor. Sleeping on a bench? The system's not always kind, and you look like someone who just needs a chance." Then she said 3 things, not rules, terms of survival. "If you come with me, there are 3 conditions," Eleanor said. 1, you finish high school, no excuses. 2, you apply to at least 3 colleges, I don't care which. And 3, she looked straight at her, you don't waste your mind on hate. Anger is fuel, but hate will rot you. Vivien didn't speak, but her eyes said everything. That attic room would become more than shelter. It would become a restart button, a new chapter, the beginning of something quietly life-saving. Wilson High didn't smell like hope. It smelled like bleach-damp hallways and cafeteria priests. The lockers were dented, the paint was chipped, the welcome sign in the front office had a letter missing. Vivien didn't belong there, but then again, she didn't belong anywhere anymore. No one knew she'd once been on the honor roll at Central High, that she'd led a science fair project that almost won statewide. Here she was, just the new girl, the quiet one with secondhand shoes and eyes that didn't meet yours. She sat in the back of every classroom, head down, hoodie up, invisible. The teachers didn't ask questions. The students didn't care. And honestly, neither did Vivien. She was exhausted, tired of explaining, tired of pretending. Every morning, she rode the bus in silence. Every afternoon, she went straight back to Eleanor's attic, dumped her bag, and collapsed onto the bed like gravity was stronger than usual. But still, she showed up. She turned in assignments, she passed every quiz. Not because she had dreams left, but because giving up would mean Alan Whitmore had won. And if she was going to disappear, she wanted it to be her choice, not his. The topic was the Fourth Amendment, illegal searches. Individual rights. Something most students barely skimmed in their textbooks. Vivien sat in the last row as always, half listening, half fading, until he started talking. A boy in the front, polished, confident, loud. "If you have nothing to hide, you shouldn't mind being searched," he declared smug. The class chuckled. Even the teacher raised an eyebrow, intrigued, not alarmed. But something in Vivien's spine snapped upright. Her hand moved before her brain caught up. She stood. "That's not how the Constitution works," she said, voice steady. All heads turned, including the boys, who looked her up and down like she was a ghost. Vivien didn't blink. The Fourth Amendment protects against unreasonable searches. It's not about hiding something. It's about boundaries, about privacy, about trust between citizens and their government. She walked forward slowly, eyes locked on the board. In Map v. Ohio, evidence found during an illegal search was ruled inadmissible. In Terry v. Ohio, the court set limits on stop and frisk. And in Katz versus United States, the court said plainly, the Fourth Amendment protects people, not places. Dead silence. The boy tried to recover. "Well, maybe, but still doesn't override the Constitution," she cut in. The teacher, Miss Vale, leaned on her desk, watching her like someone seeing color after months of grayscale. Vivien's heart was pounding. But not from fear, from something deeper, older. The fire was back, and for the first time in months, she felt powerful. After class, Vivien tried to slip out unnoticed. She grabbed her backpack, head down, ready to disappear. But Miss Vale was faster. "Vivien?" She froze. "Can you stay for a minute?" The room was empty, only the sound of chairs creaking and the faint hum of the fluorescent lights above. Vivien shifted, unsure if she was in trouble, but Miss Vale didn't scold. She smiled just slightly. "You argue like someone who's been silenced too long." That one sentence, it cut deeper than any insult she'd heard this year, and somehow it felt like truth. Miss Vale walked over, calm and measured, as if handling something fragile. "You didn't just speak. You listened, dissected, responded. That's not something I can teach in a textbook." Vivien looked at the floor. "I didn't mean to cause trouble." "You didn't," Miss Vale said. "You caused awakening." She handed Vivien a folded paper. It was an invitation to the school's debate team tryouts. "I think you were born for this," Miss Vale added, "and I think the world needs to hear your voice more often." Vivien didn't know what to say. No one had looked at her like that in months, like she mattered, like she wasn't invisible. She nodded, slowly, and somewhere deep inside her chest, a spark caught flame. It was supposed to be just another file, another boring internship task. Vivien had been filing documents for weeks, writing memos, proofreading contracts, but this one had her name on it, or rather names she knew all too well. Client Eleanor Moore, defendant Whitmore Ventures, Inc. Her eyes froze on that second line. Whitmore. Her lungs forgot how to breathe. She opened the folder, hands trembling. Inside were bank statements, legal claims, testimonies. The dates matched, the transactions matched. And the signature on the final approval line, Alan Whitmore, her father. The same man who once told her blood is thicker than anything. The same man who threw her out over a coffee cup. And now, he was running a company that had scammed Eleanor out of her retirement fund. The woman who had fed her, sheltered her, believed in her when no one else did. Vivien gripped the file tighter, her jaw clenched, her throat burned. It wasn't just another case anymore. It was personal. It started with one file, but it didn't end there. Vivien couldn't sleep that night. The air in Eleanor's attic felt heavier, thicker, as if silence itself had become suspicious. She reopened the case folder, read every line twice. Something didn't sit right. The names, the payment structures, the language in the contracts. It felt rehearsed. The next day, Vivien skipped lunch and dove into the archive room. A mountain of dusty folders, rows of locked cabinets. No one watched them. No one cared, but she did. And the more she read, the colder her hands became. Case 142, Judith Mason, age 83, lost $112,000. Case 167, Leo Chung, age 76, house restructured, then seized. Case 184, Eleanor Moore. They all had the same format, the same signatures, the same name at the top of the approval chain, Alan Whitmore. This wasn't an accident. It was a machine, a system built to hunt the isolated. They targeted seniors without close family, used emotional manipulation, sold them investment plans disguised as wellness packages, then drained them dry. Eleanor was just the most recent. Vivien's hands trembled as she snapped shut the last folder. Her voice, once silenced, whispered to no one in particular, "You don't get to do this to people like her." For the first time, she wasn't just fighting for Eleanor. She was fighting for all the voices they tried to erase. The partners offered her a future, a job, prestige, a corner office in 2 years. "You're brilliant, Vivien," they said. "You have the kind of fire this firm needs." But they didn't know what she had found. Or maybe they did, because when she mentioned Eleanor's name, their smiles thinned. When she brought up the other victims, their tone changed. Be smart, they said, not emotional. But how do you not feel when the woman who gave you a second life has been robbed of hers? How do you stay silent when the man who built your nightmares is celebrated for his suits and speeches? She stared at the contract on the table, her name printed in bold, a salary with too many zeros. Then she looked at Eleanor, fragile but proud, holding a paper bag of tea and tissues, still believing in her. Vivien stood, and for the first time, she didn't ask for permission. I'm representing Eleanor Moore, she said, her voice steady like a sword unsheathed. The room fell silent. The senior partner blinked. You'd throw your future away for her? Vivien met his gaze, fire in her chest now unmistakable. No, she whispered. I'm saving mine. And just like that, she walked out of the firm and straight into the storm she was born to face. Miss Park, are you ready to begin? The judge's voice echoed across the courtroom. Vivien stood slowly, her breath steady, her hands clenched beneath the table. The courtroom was packed. Reporters, law clerks, spectators, even former classmates. But all she saw was him, Alan Whitmore. Polished suit, cufflinks gleaming, looking at her like she was still a teenager who didn't know better. She picked up her notes, walked to the center of the floor, cleared her throat. Ladies and gentlemen of the court, she began. The defendant in this case is accused of orchestrating a long-term scheme to defraud the elderly. Her voice was strong, clear, controlled. But then she paused, a heartbeat and another. Before I proceed, she said, her voice dropping just slightly, I must disclose something to the court, for transparency. Alan shifted in his chair. For the first time, his jaw tightened. The defendant, Vivien, inhaled. Is my father. Silence. A full 6 seconds of nothing. Then pens dropped. Murmurs spread. Phones buzzed. One journalist mouthed, Did she just say father? The judge banged his gavel. Order in the courtroom. But the damage was done. This wasn't just a case anymore. This was a war between bloodlines, between the man who gave her life and the woman he tried to erase. Celeste Whitmore sat straight in the witness chair, pearl earrings, cream blazer, a face that had practiced soft innocence. But Vivien had learned something about masks. The prettier they looked, the darker they usually hid. Mrs. Whitmore, Vivien said, pacing slowly, you've stated that your relationship with the defendant began after his wife passed away, correct? Celeste gave a sweet smile. Yes, that's right. We were just colleagues before that. Vivien nodded. Interesting. Could you remind the court when exactly you were hired at Whitmore Ventures? January 7th, Celeste replied confidently, of that year. And my mother, Vivien, said, slowly passed away March 12th. Celeste's smile froze. A hush fell over the courtroom. Vivien walked to the evidence screen, tapped a document. Your hiring paperwork says you were designated as executive assistant directly under Mr. Whitmore with overnight business trips beginning 2 weeks later. Celeste cleared her throat. That was purely professional. So professional, Vivien said sharply, that you booked a double suite under his name at the Sapphire Resort in February, a full month before my mother died. A murmur rippled through the room. Tell me, Mrs. Whitmore, Vivien said, stepping closer, voice colder now. Was it grief that brought you two together, or convenience? Celeste couldn't answer, not without ripping apart the lie she had built. And the jury, already watching, had just seen the first crack in the carefully painted porcelain. The courtroom emptied out slowly after the hearing. Vivien gathered her files, heading toward the elevator. But just as the doors closed, a hand shot through the gap. Alan. The doors opened again with a soft chime. He stepped in, calm, too calm. They stood in silence for a moment, father and daughter, but not really, not anymore. Alan leaned in slightly, voice low, velvet wrapped in venom. "You're trying to punish your daddy," he whispered. This circus in court, it's just your grief talking." Vivien didn't flinch, didn't blink. She turned to face him, eyes sharp as ice. "You stopped being my father," she said quietly, "the day you packed that bag and threw me out while I was still grieving her." Alan's jaw flexed. For the first time, he wasn't smirking. "You think this trial will cleanse you?" he hissed. "You think a courtroom gives you a new identity?" Vivien stepped back, still composed. "No," she said, "but it gives Eleanor a voice. And Mom dignity. You built your empire on silence, Alan. I'm not 17 anymore. I don't need a father. I need the truth." The elevator doors opened again. Vivien stepped out. Alan stayed inside. The doors slid shut. So did the last remnants of whatever family they once were. The courtroom was buzzing. Alan's defense had just submitted a sealed file. Vivien's heart sank when she saw the label, Psychiatric Evaluation, Vivien Whitmore. She stood up immediately. "Your Honor, I've never undergone such an evaluation. This is fabricated." But the judge looked concerned. "Miss Whitmore, the report includes your name, signature, and medical ID." Alan's attorney smirked. The media took notice. Gasps echoed. Vivien froze. For the first time, doubt flickered. Was this how they planned to ruin her? Then, a voice from the back of the courtroom, "That report is a lie." Heads turned. Vivien did too. Daphne Reed, the former best friend, the one who had once said, "You're a disruption," now walking forward, file in hand, wearing her badge. Certified psychologist. "I did the internship at Harmon Psychiatric Clinic," she said firmly. "This file is doctored. I've seen the originals. Vivien was never a patient." But someone used her ID in a staged intake form dated the day after her mother's funeral. Vivien's knees nearly gave out, not because of the attack, but because Daphne had come back. The judge ordered the report stricken from the record. The defense stuttered. Alan's face went pale. Vivien looked across the room, met Daphne's eyes. They didn't hug, but they didn't need to. The truth had spoken. The courtroom was tense. Vivien stepped forward, holding a manila folder. She looked straight at the judge. "With the court's permission," she said, "I'd like to submit Exhibit 37. A murmur rose from the defense table. "This," Vivien said, placing the file down, "is a DNA report commissioned independently and legally on the paternity of Jackson Whitmore, listed as the son of Alan Whitmore and Celeste Moore." The judge adjusted her glasses. The room leaned in. Vivien continued, voice calm but cutting. "The results show there is zero biological relation between Mr. Whitmore and the child. In plain terms, Jackson is not Alan's son." A collective gasp. Celeste's face turned pale. Alan stiffened. Vivien walked toward the jury. "Why is this relevant?" she asked. "Because Mr. Whitmore used this child falsely as part of his defense, to present himself as a family man. He defrauded the court emotionally, just as he defrauded the elderly financially." She turned slowly. And Celeste, she knew. She always knew. Yet she continued the lie to secure wealth, property, and legal protection. Vivien paused at the center of the courtroom. This is not just a paternity issue. This is about a pattern of lies, of fraud, of deception woven through every aspect of their lives. Alan stood up suddenly. "Objection! Irrelevant personal attack!" The judge banged her gavel. "Sit down, Mr. Whitmore." Vivien stared directly at him. You replaced my mother with a lie. Now the truth replaces you. Silence, and then whispers, from jury box to gallery. The bomb had landed. Vivien stood at the center of the courtroom facing the jury. Her voice was clear, without anger, without theatrics, just truth. This case isn't about contracts. It's not even about money. It's about what they took that you can't write down in numbers. They didn't just steal homes, they stole dignity. They stole trust. They stole the peace of people who thought their final years would be safe. She paused, letting the silence wrap around every word. My client, Eleanor Park, once opened her home to a teenage girl with nowhere to go. That same girl is now asking you on Eleanor's behalf to give that dignity back. Vivien looked each juror in the eye. You're not just deciding a verdict. You're deciding whether truth still matters, whether compassion is stronger than greed. And then she ended with the line that would echo far beyond the courtroom. Today, you don't just return stolen assets, you return stolen dignity. She sat down. The room was still. No coughs, no whispers, just breath held. The jury left for deliberation. They returned in under an hour. The foreperson stood, hands steady, voice unwavering. We find in favor of the plaintiff. Full restitution, damages awarded, and referral to the district attorney's office for criminal investigation. Alan's shoulders collapsed. Celeste broke into silent sobs. Vivien didn't celebrate. She simply closed her eyes. Justice had spoken. He didn't scream. He didn't beg. He just sat frozen. Alan Whitmore, once a giant in the world of finance and philanthropy, now looked like an aging man in a suit too big for his sins. His hands trembled on the courtroom bench. His eyes red, not from grief, but exposure. No cameras followed him now. No admirers shook his hand. No Celeste at his side. She stood a few feet away, arms crossed, mascara smudged. Vivien passed them in the hallway after the verdict. Celeste turned sharply, her voice cracked from exhaustion and bitterness. Haven't you done enough, Vivien? He's ruined. You got what you wanted. Vivien didn't stop walking, but she did answer softly. No, I got what you never wanted, the truth. Celeste didn't reply. She couldn't. Alan looked up at his daughter for a second, not in anger, not in pleading, just emptiness. Like a man who realized he hadn't lost his legacy, he'd never truly built one. The house felt too quiet. No humming in the kitchen, no teacup clinks, no Eleanor. It had been 3 weeks since her passing, 3 weeks of silence wrapped in grief. And yet, on that morning, something arrived that made the air shift. A shoebox, worn, tied shut with a purple ribbon. Inside were letters. Dozens of them, all handwritten, all addressed to Vivien. Each envelope was dated. Each message was short, but full of that unmistakable Eleanor warmth. Some were notes of encouragement. If no one claps for you, clap anyway. You're still brilliant. Others were advice for hard days. Sleep before you scream. Eat before you cry. And some were simply love. You don't owe the world perfection. You owe it your story. But every letter, every single one, ended the same. Fight smart, but love louder. Vivien didn't cry at the first letter, or the 5th, but somewhere around the 12th, her hands began to shake, because Eleanor had written to every version of her, the angry teenager, the struggling student, the courtroom warrior, and the woman still learning how to forgive. These weren't just letters. They were a lifeline across time. The courtroom was silent again. But this time, it wasn't fear holding its breath. It was respect. Vivien stood tall, her voice steady, her presence undeniable. She no longer wore the name Whitmore, a name tied to betrayal, to a man who buried love beneath wealth. No. Today, she stood as Vivien Ellen Park. Vivien, the daughter who rose. Ellen, for the mother who gave her everything and still had more to give. And Park, the name of the woman who saved her when no one else would. She wasn't just a lawyer anymore. She was an advocate for the children sleeping on benches, for the girls who got called disruption instead of daughter, for every soul told they were too broken to become whole. And as she looked into the eyes of the jury in her latest case, a custody battle for a foster child, she said, "I stand here today not because of who hurt me, but because of who healed me." There were tears in the room, but hers had long dried. Because Vivien Ellen Park had found her purpose, not in revenge, but in redemption. You don't get to choose where your story begins, but you do get to choose how it ends. Vivien was abandoned by her own blood, but she didn't let pain define her path. She chose to rise, to heal, and to become the defender for those who had no voice. That's the message we all need. Let the past shape you, but never shrink you. Let your wounds become your compass. And remember, they may have knocked you down, but only you can decide to stand back up. If you saw even a piece of yourself in Vivien's journey, if you've ever felt forgotten, unworthy, or left behind, subscribe to Whispers of Life now. Here, we share stories that heal, inspire, and remind you you are never truly alone. And no matter where you are on your journey, there is always light ahead. Let these stories whisper to your heart and remind you to believe in love again.